when you looked back on the tape, anything more than what you said last night jump out at you?
No, I just think it provides more affirmation that what we saw from the bench was actually the case. We certainly weren't at our best. I think we're capable of much better. Having said that, it's one game. We've got to try to learn from it, move by it, and get ready for the next one. But I think there's a lot to take from a learning opportunity, that's for sure. Starting in the defensive zone, I thought we vacated our net front a fair amount. We allowed them to get inside us a little too often, and we gave up some high-quality looks. I thought Shesty made a couple of big saves to keep it at one goal. For me, I think that's the biggest area where I think we've got to do a better job just playing within structure, and then we've got an opportunity to kill plays by physically getting into people and getting the puck stopped. We got to try to do that.
Is some of that just guys still trying to understand the system or thinking maybe?
Yeah, I'm sure that's a little bit of it. It's obviously it's a little bit different, and it's going to take some time. But we're working at it. We worked at it again today, and we'll continue to work at it.
As far as getting out of your own zone and advancing pucks, like what do you see in there? I mean, was that an issue you thought last night?
Well, I think they're connected, right? When you're in the wrong spots, sometimes the transition component of defense isn't ideal because you don't have predictable outlets, you don't have predictable options. So I think we were a little bit disconnected from that standpoint. We watched we watched some film this morning around this stuff and trying to help the guys and clarify some of the concepts so that we can be a little bit more predictable for one another. But I do think they're connected.
How do you balance? JT mentioned after yesterday's game that he still obviously was coming off the injury and didn't feel great the whole time. How do you balance both wanting him out there and also kind of making sure that he does get back to 100% at some point?
Yeah, well, we're going to have to take it day by day. And, obviously JT missed a fair amount of training camp, as did Brett. So, those two guys are jumping on a moving train. And when you miss that much time, it's not easy to jump back into an NHL game at NHL pace. And just even from a conditioning standpoint, I think those guys will get better with every game they play. I think they'll get better with timing and reads and all of those things. So we'll take each day as it comes, and we'll try to manage it accordingly.
You said there was hesitation in your game yesterday. Have you kind of pinpointed a specific reason for that?
Well, I think there's a few reasons for it. One is maybe some new ideas, and the other aspect of it is just making decisions with conviction. If we make decisions with conviction, even if they're wrong, it gives us an opportunity to react to it away from you. And I think, when there's hesitation, all the reads and the decisions away from you become much more difficult. So, but I think there's a few reasons for it, but I do think, speaking on the defensive side of the puck, in particular in our end, I think a lot of these things are correctable because it has to do with intentions and then it has to do with just details and playing within structure. And I said to the players this morning, I said their responsibility is to bring the right intentions, and our responsibility as a coaching staff is we're going to try to help them and clarify the structure so that we have support mechanisms built in place and we can be more predictable for one another when we're playing there. So that was part of the conversation today.
Adam had said after the game last night he thought as a group of five you guys weren't connected. Can connectivity be developed in practices, or is it developed just playing games?
I think it's both. Part of connectivity is just having some predictability in your game, and you build over the course of time you build trust. And when you build trust in your game, that's when I think players tend to play on their toes, and they're instinctive and they anticipate, and because they have a good understanding of where their line mates are going to be and their teammates are going to be. And that's, we'll get better at that in due time, but excuse me, it's a little bit of a process.
Speaking of trust, when you see Matt and his size, just what is your belief that he can be effective and find that net, and trust that he's going to do the right things there?
Well, we through the course of the exhibition season, and I think I might have mentioned this before when I was asked about this question. He's a handful at the net front. He takes up a lot of space by nature of his physical stature. He makes it hard on the goalie sightlines, and he makes it hard for defensemen at the net front. And if we're able to get pucks down there and get people inside, there should be a lot of opportunity that presents itself, either for Matt or for people converging on that next play. Sometimes those broken plays when you sift a puck down and you just put one in play, and it might hit somebody, it might hit the goalie might make a positional save, he doesn't necessarily see it, it just hits him, or it just hits the mass of humanity in front of the net, opportunity presents itself. And so that's what he provides. He's big, he's strong, he's willing to go there, and he's got decent puck skills. So, we thought we'd try him through the course of the exhibition season. We thought we saw enough that we would continue to stay with it, and, we'll see where it goes moving forward, but we think that's something that potentially he could help us in that aspect of the team game.
You've coached against Jonathan Quick for a lot of years now. I guess what stood out about him as a teammate once you got here, just kind of the presence he has in the room, and what he can bring to a team off the ice even when he's not playing?
Yeah, well, he's a fierce competitor. That was my initial observation when I first met him. I first met him it was at the World Cup. What year was that? 2016. Yeah, it was at the World Cup. I was an assistant coach on that team. He's a fierce competitor, and I think he shows that through his work ethic. I think the legacy that he's built in this league and that he continues to build speaks for itself. He's a two-time Stanley Cup champion and was a huge part of those teams in LA that won cups, and he's a great teammate on top of it. I think he understands what winning looks like because he's been a part of it, and I think he can bring the benefit of that experience to this group. And I also think he has a way about him that he's a likable guy with his teammates, and when he speaks, they listen, as they should.
With your experience, when you go into a building on a home opener, just what do you have to warn your team about, going into Buffalo?
Well, it'll be emotional, just like the one was last night, for us. And so we've got to try to use that energy in a positive way.